And the beautiful thing about gameplay is games teach you to fail, right? You fail a level, you die, you go back to the start, you do it again, but you've learned from that mistake.
Hi, I'm Henry, and welcome to another episode of SF Yuppies. I'm here today with Lynn, Head of Operations at Omnivis. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
How did you become passionate about education?
I first fell in love with education at a very young age without realizing it. One of our first assignments, I remember, on probably maybe my first or second week at school, we were given postcards and told, write your dream and draw a picture that's associated with that dream. And I had written, I wish education was free and equal. I don't know what I was thinking at my age. So after I graduated college, I actually worked for an architecture firm. And in the meantime, I was volunteering and mentoring children. And it never occurred to me that education could be a career choice. After a few years of frustration, I joined AmeriCorps, worked with a bunch of underserved children for 10 months, and it changed my view on everything. When I finished AmeriCorps, I worked with KIPP Bay Area. So KIPP Bay Area is a charter school system. After that, I went to Girls Who Code. So I was interested to see specifically how girls were struggling in education. I fell in love with this new thing called virtual reality. And to me, virtual reality, it's more than just, Ready Player One. To me, it's already here. It's very powerful. And the reason for that, and the reason it interested me, was you learn the things that you remember in school are things that you explored or things that you wanted to learn on your own. They weren't things that you read in a textbook. You're not going to remember what you read, but you're going to remember the Oregon Trail, right? Everyone remembers it because you explored it, and that sense of exploration is amazing and it stays with you. In VR, a well-designed experience, it puts you somewhere and then you just experiment around. You make mistakes. And the beautiful thing about gameplay is games teach you to fail, right? You fail a level, you die, you go back to the start, you do it again, but you've learned from that mistake. In school, when you fail, it stays with you. You get that F or even just a D or a C, it stays with you and you will never be valedictorian, right? It's a punishable offense. It's not encouraged. So I wanted to see how VR with a gaming background and technology could change schools. And it has in a lot of schools, but it's also unfortunately created a lot of wealth disparity among schools because it is expensive.
What would you say is the most challenging part about working in education?
Definitely how to make it equitable. So to me, equal and fair are very fluffed up words. Equity is a lot more important to me. Equity is understanding the child and understanding their challenges, and more than just a blanket statement saying that they're poor, so they need financial aid. A lot of times it's a lot more than that. So the biggest challenge is spending that time to understand the child. A lot of times it'll be one teacher to 30 students, and the teacher doesn't have the time or the energy as much as they may love and care teaching. They just can't get to know every student on a personal one-on-one basis.
What role do you think technology can play in education?
I really enjoy learning about educational platforms that are sharing student-made projects with each other. Sony came out with something called the Couve, and it's this really simple, affordable, think Legos meets Google Blocks. So it's meant for very young children. It teaches them how to code, but it gives them some basic instructions, and then after that it says go wild and build something. And with those Legos, you create something, code it in, and they move a certain way. But depending on how you code it, your imagination is the limit. But the amazing part of this platform is that it's international. It first launched in Japan, and it launched, I believe, in April in America. You go on their website and you see students have uploaded their code and their creations, and people are commenting and saying, oh wow, this is cool. How did you make the tail move? How did you make the jaw move faster? And there's just so many elements. So things that take the pressure off teachers and let students teach each other is a really great way technology can reach a lot more people.
At what point would you say it's too much tech in the education world? In other words, how do you strike the balance between human interactions versus technology?
That is such a tough question. I think if you asked me 5 years ago, I would say there's already too much tech. But I think used in the right way, there is no limit to technology. Virtual reality, for example, it doesn't dehumanize the user. If used in the right way, it actually teaches you empathy. It allows you to travel the world in, your kitchen or your living room. When I'm talking to teachers that are using VR most successfully, I initially thought they'd be using it to teach science or math, right? Because these are things like you can show, this is what a brain looks like, this is what it looks like when you dissect it. But a lot of teachers told me they were teaching them foreign language and culture studies. And I was really confused, and they told me it's because students are afraid to speak in front of their peers in a language they're not familiar with. They feel awkward. But when they have a VR headset on, they think they're somewhere else, and suddenly they're walking the streets of Paris and speaking French and buying a baguette. And being surrounded by the noises of the street in Paris, they can almost smell it, they feel like they're there, and they understand the culture and the language so much better than what they read from in a textbook.
What's your perspective on standardized testing?
I hate it. Standardized testing really teaches you to memorize things that are largely unimportant for a short amount of time, put it all on paper, and then forget it for the next standardized test. It doesn't promote curiosity. It doesn't tell people to explore and dive deeper into a topic. It's really all about memorization. And to me, that's pretty useless. I don't remember a lot of the things that were tested. I just remember the stress and the amount of time that it took. Also, public schools are heavily funded based on what they receive in standardized testing. Teachers are promoted based on how well their class does in standardized testing. And because of that, a lot of times they're teaching exactly what is on the test, instead of teaching them what the child might be interested in or what they might need in their future lives.
What would you say is a better alternative to standardized testing?
I really like end-of-year projects. So these are very popular with science teachers. But I remember I think it was human sciences. All she told us was it had to do something with your body and something to do with what you like. Just explain the movements of your body doing that thing. And that was it. And you were given, I think, 6 months to do it. It was the majority of your grade for that year. And I've been playing violin all my life. So I really analyzed every bone, every tendon, every muscle that it takes to simply draw a bow, like just to make one note. And diving into that very simple concept, it also teaches you physics, right? Because depending on where the bow lands, there's a different volume that's associated with it. It depends on where the fulcrum of the bow is. And when there's volume involved, then it's also auditory. So in those 6 months, I kind of went crazy and analyzed everything that went into making a single note on a violin. And I remember every single aspect of it. I interviewed doctors. I interviewed my violin teacher. I took apart a violin to understand how it was made and how sound resonates within its body. And in a standardized test, probably 2% of that information was useful. But it's something that I learned and follows me to this day.
And if you had an ideal world for education, what would that look like?
Well, every student would be going to school because they loved it. They would pick their own classes starting at a really early age. I would say as early as 8, honestly. Class would be starting later and ending earlier, with the later classes allowing them to do something that they were passionate about. And it would be 4 days, with the 5th day either volunteering in the community or doing an internship, or if they're an athlete, practicing what they're passionate about. After high school, I want every student to do 1 year of community service. That is paid, in a way, as stipend. Working with a community they're unfamiliar with, but in a capacity that they see themselves doing in a career further down the road.
For a young working professional who's busy with a full-time job, but they're passionate about education, what are some ways that they can do to help?
So glad you asked that. There's a lot of nonprofits that are amazing. Depending on what your interest is, if you want to mentor a child, there's an organization called Minds Matter. They're in a lot of cities across the country. So there's probably one near you. But basically 2 mentors are tied to one student, and it's for 3 years, and you help them apply to college, you answer questions, and you just show them what it's like to be in the working life and not to be a parent, right? Students don't like to ask their parents for advice. But if you're an entrepreneur and you really want to help a student build their own company, there is a nonprofit called Build. And as a Build mentor, in that 1 year that you're with them, you help them create a company. And from everything from business plan to actually registering as a company and selling whatever their product or service might be. So depending on what your focus is and what your strength is, there are so many opportunities out there.
What would you say is your motto in life?
Well, I have it tattooed on me. It's embrace the wind. And the concept behind that is you can't really control what the wind blows. It could be a nice breeze, but it could be a hurricane. But whatever it is, embrace it and learn from it. If it's a challenge, take that with both hands and overcome that challenge. If it's a blessing, then, great.
Oh, well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, sorry, I thought we were done.
No, I'll say it, and then you can respond like whatever. You can say like, "Oh, it was cool to be here," or
Okay.
"I did not enjoy this."
I'll redo that.
I feel like you should just end it like that.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fun to chat.